Hey everyone, RogueGold here, welcome back to the Division 2, and today I want to break down, give some of my thoughts, and an overall review on the new Provocator exotic. If you have been around community forums these past few weeks, or maybe you're thinking this yourself, a lot of people are saying this is one of the worst exotics in the game. So, do I agree? Let's discuss. Before we get to that, I will also briefly cover what this item does and where you can get it in case you haven't been in the loop, but yeah, should be a good time. If you end up enjoying the video and you want to stay up to date on everything with the Division 2 moving forward, then I hope you will consider clicking that subscribe button if you haven't already. We would love to have you around. But without further ado, let's go. Alright, so, the Provocator. In case you haven't heard, this new exotic is available exclusively from the Year 6 Season 2 Climax mission, the one that just released this week. It is a 100% guaranteed drop on your first clear of Master difficulty if you choose to run the mission on that. However, that is not required if you want to run it on one of the standard difficulties, normal through heroic. It does have a percentage chance to drop, however you might have to farm the mission a few times to see that. Taking a look at this item, we first have the overall visuals of it. Despite its performance, most people agree that this thing looks pretty fire. I agree, I think it looks quite cool. The flavor text is kind of funny, a little bit of Lord of the Rings in there. It reads, "One does not simply wear red into battle, a red knight is not afraid, but ready to provoke." This comes with armor, hazard protection, and armor regen. You cannot change those stats, it will always come with those. The talent is then called Challenger. Receive 25% damage resistance from enemies within 20 meters. And then if we toggle the PvP stats, in PvP it gives you 20% resistance within 15 meters. So on paper that might sound pretty strong, but what people have been saying after trying this out in gameplay is that the talent direction itself isn't quite worthwhile enough, right? There's no kind of buff you can proc, there's no threshold in which you'll get an extra bonus, it's just get this within this range, and ultimately people are saying those values are too low to make this worthwhile to run. Now here is where I will agree, this is absolutely a niche item, right? It's not one of those universal exotics that you can just slot into a variety of builds and it will suddenly make that build better. I consider those kinds of items to be things like the Coyote's Mask, the Memento, even Catharsis. However, what I think this item's niche is that it does fulfill the ultimate philosophy of a tank in these kind of RPG MMO style of games, where you get in the enemy's face, you take aggro, and you try not to die. This is why in the gameplay you see me taking this into Legendary and getting right up in the enemy's faces, and if you set this up right, it's actually pretty effective at that. Don't worry, we will get to the build shortly, but the problem that I think many are running into is that you don't often need that kind of ultimate tank in this game, right? On any difficulty that is not Legendary or the new Master or Raids or Incursions, you simply don't need that kind of resistance. You can run a lot of other stuff and be just as effective. And even in that aforementioned content, most people think that it is more worthwhile to run stuff like Protection from Elites with other debuffs. Maybe instead of having a full shield, you run the Scorpio to be able to use that on enemies. They'll run Tardigrade to buff up their allies. So in light of all that, when I was setting up a build for this, I wanted to really lean into the full tank playstyle, and because of that, I decided to run the Aegis gear set. In case you don't know what this does, because it is a lesser used set for sure, it basically gives you increasing amounts of damage resistance for how many enemies aggro you can pull onto you, and that is then multiplied by the number of players in your group. I am using the Aegis backpack on here, which gives the amplification talent of increasing those stacks of 4% to 5% damage resistance, and that means that at its maximum effectiveness, if I'm in a group of 4 and I have 8 enemies targeting me, any enemy within 20 meters of me, I have 81% damage resistance against, and that is without calculating in any protection from elites. So that is quite strong, right? That is a lot of damage mitigated. And as you'll see in the gameplay, I'm able to soak a ton of things being thrown at me. Continuous fire from White Tusk units, the Stinger Hive on the White Tusk heavy unit, and with the proper team structure and support, it is very hard to die while you're running this. But that too I think is a little bit part of the problem. You do really need a proper healer in your group to make this build effective. And so it actually worked out well for demonstration purposes. In the early parts of this mission, our team did not have a healer, and I was definitely struggling more to stay alive while being as aggressive as I was being. However, a teammate then decided to switch to a dedicated healer build, and I became nearly unkillable. We had a very easy time going through these rooms, no communication required. So this is a look at the overall build that I was running. One important note though is that if you are going to run a healer with this, which like we said pretty much is the best way to do it, it's a lot better to swap your one high-end piece for the Chill Out Gila mask. That way you're getting even more armor from the brand bonus, and you can then equip 4 total protection from elites mods as opposed to 3. On this version, before I knew a healer was going to join the group, I was kind of just testing out the solo healing potential of this. But yeah, like we said, it works much better if you focus on full tanking and let your group try and keep you alive with heals. So, in conclusion, is this one of the worst exotics in in the game? I don't think so, no. You're doing a disservice to the rugged gauntlets if you say that. However, it is niche, and that niche is just not all that often needed in the Division 2's content, even if it is rather effective. But if you want to mitigate pretty much the largest amount of damage as possible in this game, you want to fit into that traditional Trinity archetype of tank, healer, and DPS from these kinds of games, this does let you do that. And specifically looking at next season, I could see this build fitting in very well to a group where you have 2 weapon damage builds, and then 1 person running the new refactor gear set. That would be a great option to really maximize your damage output while still having a tank character to take all of the aggro. Now, as far as PvP, because I know I've had some people asking about its performance there, I did have some initial success with this thing on stream. We tested it out in the Dark Zone and Conflict. I basically used the Provocator to make a 2.0 version of my Heartstrike build. I'll link that in the description if you want to check it out. Ultimately, on the majority of builds that this would slot into, I think you're simply sacrificing too much to run this, right? You can't have Unbreakable, you can't have Catharsis, and without that, if you're just receiving mitigation within that 15 meters, it definitely limits what you're able to do. Across the board, I foresee people talking about a buff for this item. Maybe that would be on the table. The problem is it's a very fine line with a stat like damage resistance. You know, it's more niche right now, but if it were to be buffed by just a little bit too much, then suddenly this becomes a must-run item across the game. But there you have it, my friends. That is my breakdown and review on the new Provocator exotic chess piece. I've definitely been a bit more generous than some in this breakdown here. Certainly, I still admit the shortcomings that it has, but I really think when you lean into its proper and intended usage, there is some value to be found. That said, I now turn it all over to you guys. What are your thoughts on the Provocator exotic? Whether you're just going off of what I've shown in the video here, or you've gotten this item in game yourself and you've been testing it out, what do you think about where this exotic has landed? Is it going to have a place in the Division 2's build landscape? Let me know it all down below. That is going to do it for me today though, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.